The words hung in the air like toxic smoke, suffocating the dining room as my father's face contorted with rage. "Traitor!" he spat, the accusation landing like a physical blow. 23 pairs of eyes swiveled between us, veterans and their families who had gathered for my father's retirement ceremony from the army. I felt each heartbeat in my throat as I carefully folded the napkin, standard military issue, nothing fancy, and placed it beside my barely touched plate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "Thank you for dinner, Colonel," I said, standing slowly. "And thank you for finally being honest about how you feel. My name is Eliza Reynolds. I'm 31 and a CIA operative. This is the story of how I transformed my father's public condemnation into the most important national security operation of the decade." "Eliza, don't." My mother grabbed my hand, her fingers trembling. I squeezed gently, then let go. "It's fine, Mom. Dad's right. I should know my place." The smirk on my father's face was worth memorizing. That self-satisfied expression of a man who thought he'd won, who believed he'd finally exposed the family disappointment, who'd chosen to work some desk job at the State Department instead of following 4 generations of Reynolds into military service. If only he knew. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, past the medals and commendations lining the hallway, past the uniformed service members who avoided eye contact, past the American flag my father had made sure to mention I was dishonoring by not serving. I walked through the officers' club and out to the parking lot where my car waited. Mom caught up to me at my car, my sensible Subaru that Dad had sneered at when I'd pulled up. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. I had no idea he would. I pulled her close, inhaling the scent of her perfume mixed with the salt of her tears. "This isn't your fault. I'll talk to him, make him apologize." "No." I tucked a strand of her graying hair behind her ear. "No more apologizing for him. No more making excuses. He said what he's been thinking for the past 10 years. At least now we know where we stand. Eliza, please don't let him ruin our family." I kissed her forehead. "He can't ruin what's real. Mom, I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" She nodded reluctantly, and I drove away from the Fort Bragg Officers Club, watching in my rearview mirror as the building grew smaller, its lights fading into the North Carolina night. My phone started buzzing before I even hit the main road. I ignored it, knowing it was probably my brother Michael trying to smooth things over, or maybe my sister Jennifer offering awkward solidarity. They weren't bad people, just torn between their military careers and supporting me. But I had more important calls to make. I voice-dialed my handler as I merged onto the highway. "Silas, I know it's late." "Agent Reynolds, is everything all right?" Silas had been my handler for 5 years, since before the world knew Eliza Reynolds as anything other than a mid-level State Department analyst. "Cancel the Reynolds extraction. The colonel's not coming in." Silence. Then, "Ma'am, we're supposed to bring him in on Monday. The briefing is complete. The safe house is secured." "I'm aware. Kill it. He's not ready. The termination fees alone will be. I don't care about the resources. Send notice to the director tonight. Cite irreconcilable differences in operational security and protocol." "Eliza." Silas dropped the formalities, which he only did when he thought I was making a mistake. "This is a high-value asset extraction. Whatever happened at dinner?" "He called me a traitor, Silas. In front of a room full of his military colleagues, made it clear that someone like me, who chose intelligence over combat, will never be good enough for his family, or, by extension, his cooperation. That bastard." Silas's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. I could hear it through the phone. "I'll have operational security draw up the termination papers within the hour. Want me to notify the counterintelligence team?" "Not yet. Let him wake up to the official notice first. We'll let counterintelligence handle the fallout by noon tomorrow." "With pleasure, ma'am. Anything else?" I thought for a moment. "Yes. Set up a meeting with the Kazakhstani attaché for Monday. If Colonel Reynolds won't help us identify the mole in Central Command, Maybe their defense ministry will. You're going to flip his source instead? Quote, why not? Traitors have to stick together, right? I hung up and drove the rest of the way to my safe house in silence. The city lights blurred past, each one a reminder of how far I'd come from the kid who'd followed her father around military bases, reciting rank structures and dreaming of carrying on the family legacy. Colonel James Reynolds thought he knew me, thought he'd watched me grow up enough to understand what kind of woman his daughter had become. He knew I'd graduated with honors, that I'd started working at the State Department at 22, that I'd put myself through advanced language training through sheer determination and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. What he didn't know was that the diplomat daughter he looked down on had built an intelligence network while staying in the shadows. That Operation Kingfisher, the counter-espionage initiative his own team was desperately trying to support to identify a Russian asset in their midst, was mine. That I'd spent the last decade cultivating assets, analyzing patterns, and strategically positioning myself to become the point person on Russian infiltration of U.S. military command structures. He didn't know because I'd kept it quiet, using cover identities and compartmentalized information as the shield for my operations. I'd learned early that real power came from being underestimated, from letting blowhards like my father think they held all the cards while I quietly built the deck. As I pulled into my building's garage, my phone lit up with an incoming call. General Marshall Baker, my father's commanding officer. That was faster than expected. General Baker had my personal number from a previous operation where we'd exchanged contact information for urgent matters. Eliza, it's Marshall. I'm sorry to call so late, but we just received a notice from Langley terminating the extraction operation for your father. There must be some mistake. No mistake, General. But we're set to debrief Monday. The Intelligence Committee is already briefed. The Joint Chiefs are expecting. Then the Joint Chiefs should have thought about that before their star colonel publicly humiliated his own daughter at his retirement dinner tonight. Silence, then quietly. What did James do? Ask him yourself. I'm sure he'll give you his version. Good night, General. I hung up and headed to my apartment, pouring myself a bourbon and settling onto the balcony to watch the city sleep. Somewhere out there, Colonel James Reynolds was about to have his evening ruined. I wondered if he'd make the connection immediately, or if it would take him a while to realize that the traitor he dismissed controlled the one thing his legacy needed to remain untarnished: the identification and extraction of a Russian spy who had infiltrated his command. My phone buzzed, Mom calling. I let it go to voicemail, not trusting myself to separate my anger at my father from my love for her. She didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire. But some battles couldn't be avoided. By morning, my phone had logged 47 missed calls. Dad had tried reaching me 6 times himself, which must have been killing him. The great Colonel Reynolds reduced to repeatedly calling someone he declared a traitor to her country. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was reviewing intelligence reports over breakfast when Silas called. The director got wind of the terminated extraction. He wants a statement. Tell him the agency has decided to explore other operational avenues that better align with our values and vision for national security. Vague and devastating. I love it. He paused. Also, Colonel Reynolds is in the lobby. I nearly spit out my coffee. He's here? Showed up 20 minutes ago. Security won't let him up without your approval, but he's making quite a scene. Should I have him removed? No. I set down my mug thinking, send him up, but make him wait in the conference room for let's say 30 minutes. I'm finishing breakfast. You're evil. I'll prep conference room C, the one with the uncomfortable chairs and no windows. 45 minutes later, I walked into the conference room to find Colonel James Reynolds looking significantly less imposing than he had the night before. His usually perfect uniform was replaced by civilian clothes. His military bearing was still evident, but now tinged with something unfamiliar: uncertainty. The man who'd lorded over dinner like a commanding officer now looked like what he was: a desperate father watching his reputation evaporate. Eliza. He stood when I entered, and I could see how much it cost him. Thank you for seeing me. I sat down without offering him a handshake. You have 5 minutes. He swallowed his pride like broken glass. I want to apologize for last night. My words were inappropriate. Inappropriate? I laughed. You called me a traitor to my country in front of your entire command structure. You humiliated me at your own table while I was there as your guest and your daughter. I was angry. No, I cut him off. You were honest. Angry words, honest thoughts. You've thought I was beneath you from the moment I chose the State Department over West Point. You just finally said it out loud. My father's jaw tightened. Even now, even desperate, he couldn't fully hide his disdain. What do you want? An apology? You have it. A public statement? I'll make one. Just the operation needs to happen. You know it does. Why? Excuse me? Why does it need to happen? Explain to me why I should help someone who fundamentally disrespects me and the work I do. My father's face flushed. Because it's national security. It's not personal. Everything is personal when you make it personal. I stood up. You've watched my career, right? Seen the postings, the promotions, the commendations from ambassadors. He nodded reluctantly. But you stopped there. You saw where I worked and assumed that defined me. You never looked beyond the cover story. I walked to the wall, gesturing at the blank surface where most government offices would have maps or flags. Do you know why I'm successful, Dad? Because you're smart, always were. Because I remember being your daughter. Because I remember being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Every asset we recruit, every operation we plan, every threat we neutralize, I ask myself if we're creating security or just protecting ego. I turned back to him. Your generation of military brass represents everything I built my career to fight against. Old thinking, protecting old strategies, keeping the door closed to anyone who didn't fit the traditional warrior mold. That's not, isn't it? Name one operation you've run that prioritized intelligence over force. One strategy session where the analyst's perspective wasn't an afterthought. One promotion recommendation for someone who excelled at prevention rather than reaction. His silence was answer enough. The extraction is dead, Dad. Not because you insulted me, but because you showed me who you really are, and more importantly, you showed me who your command structure really is. This will destroy us, he said quietly. Without this operation, we can't identify the mole. My entire command will be under suspicion. Careers will end. Lives could be lost. Then maybe they should be. I headed for the door. Maybe it's time for the old guard to make way for officers who judge people by their competence, not their conformity. Wait. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. What about your country? You're going to jeopardize national security because your feelings got hurt? I paused at the door. America is resilient, talented, and capable. It doesn't need to rely on dinosaurs who can't adapt. That's the difference between us, Dad. You see patriotism as obedience. I see it as evolution. The Joint Chiefs will never forgive you. Maybe not, but at least they'll know I have principles that can't be bought or intimidated away. Can you say the same? I left him there and went back to my office. Silas was waiting with a stack of intelligence briefs and a knowing look. The Kazakhstani Defense Ministry wants to meet Monday morning. They're very interested in discussing their knowledge of Russian infiltration. Good. Make sure Dad hears about it by this afternoon. Already arranged for the information to reach him. She paused. Your mother is in your private office. My heart skipped. How long? About an hour. I brought her coffee and tissues. How did she know to come here? She called the main switchboard asking for you. When I told her you were in a meeting with the colonel, she asked if she could wait for you. Given the circumstances, I thought you wouldn't mind. After leaving my father in the conference room, I headed back to my private office where Silas informed me Mom was waiting. I found her curled up in my desk chair, eyes red but dry. She looked up when I entered, and I saw my father's determination but her own compassion in her face. Hi, she said softly. Hi. I heard what you told him. Silas, let me listen on the conference room feed. I sat on the edge of my desk. And? She stood up, coming to stand before me. I think I've been a coward, letting him treat you that way, making excuses, hoping it would get better. Mom, no. Let me finish. She took my hands. I've spent my whole life benefiting from his status, without challenging his prejudices. Last night, watching him, I was ashamed. Not of you, of him, of myself for not standing up to him sooner. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to help. I've been a military wife for 35 years. I know things, hear things. Your father isn't the only one with access to information. I pulled her close. Are you sure? Going against Dad is no small thing. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in days. Eliza Reynolds. You just terminated a critical national security operation because your father disrespected you. I think we'll figure out the family dynamics part. I love you, I said, meaning it more than ever. I love you too, even if you did just declare intelligence war on your father. Especially because I declared intelligence war on your father. Especially because of that, she agreed, hugging me. My phone buzzed. Silas again. Ma'am, General Baker is calling an emergency command meeting. Our sources say they're discussing reaching out to you directly over your father's head. I put the phone on speaker. Tell them the agency might be willing to discuss an extraction operation with Central Command under new leadership, emphasis on new. Mom's eyes widened. You're gonna oust your father from his final operation. I'm going to give the command a choice, evolve or perish. What they do with that choice is up to them. She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. He won't go quietly. I wouldn't expect him to. This is going to get ugly. Probably. Your brother will take his side. Definitely. Your sister will be caught in the middle and write another terrible poem about family drama. God help us all. She smiled, and it was sharp and beautiful and a little bit dangerous. So when do we start? I smiled back. How about now? And that's how the traitor daughter became the patriot who saved the operation. Not with a gun or a uniform, but with a simple truth. Loyalty isn't inherited, it's earned. And those who refuse to give it when it's earned, learn the hard way that sometimes the traitors are the ones who stay true to their principles when everyone else compromises. By the following Monday, Colonel James Reynolds was no longer leading the extraction operation. By Tuesday, the CIA had announced a new joint task force with the Kazakhstani Defense Ministry. By Wednesday, I had accepted a position as the task force's head of intelligence, turning down my father's offer to privately share classified information out of spite. And by Thursday, Colonel James Reynolds had learned the most valuable lesson of his career: never call someone a traitor unless you're prepared to be exposed as one yourself. The new operational headquarters was a nondescript office building in Arlington, far from the Pentagon's watchful eyes and even further from my father's sphere of influence. I walked through the security checkpoint, nodding to the guards who'd already learned my face, my credentials, my routines. 6 days since the disastrous dinner, and already the world had shifted on its axis. Morning, Director Reynolds called Marcus, our tech specialist, as I passed his workstation. Director. The title still felt foreign, like a coat borrowed from someone else's closet. But after General Baker had removed my father from the operation and requested me specifically to lead the intelligence component, I couldn't exactly say no. Not when national security was at stake. Not when I had the chance to prove everything I'd been saying for years about modern intelligence gathering. Silas is waiting in the conference room, Marcus added. Says the Kazakhstanis sent over something big. I quickened my pace, the click of my heels against tile marking time like a metronome. Silas stood when I entered, his normally impassive face betraying a hint of excitement. Tell me, I said, setting down my bag. He slid a tablet across the table. Facial recognition hit from their embassy surveillance. Our mole met with a known GRU handler yesterday afternoon. I scrolled through the images, each one clearer than the last. Do we have an ID? That's the interesting part. Silas tapped the screen, enlarging a face I knew all too well. Major Gregory Harlow, my father's protégé, his hand-picked successor, the man he'd practically adopted as a surrogate son when I'd chosen intelligence over infantry. Are we sure? I asked, though the evidence was right in front of me. 97% match. Plus the Kazakhstanis have audio. He's our guy. I sat down heavily, the implications washing over me. My father must not know. No way he could, Silas agreed. He's been grooming Harlow for years. The betrayal would destroy him. Not just him. This goes all the way up to Central Command. Harlow has been in every strategic planning session for the last 4 years. He's had access to deployment schedules, weapons systems, nuclear protocols. What do you want to do? I stared at the image of Major Harlow, handsome, charming, decorated, and thought of all the times my father had held him up as the exemplar of military excellence. Greg's going places, he'd say at family dinners. That boy understands duty and loyalty. The irony was almost too perfect. I want to bring my father in, I said finally. Silas blinked. I'm sorry, I think I misheard. You want to bring in the man who called you a traitor and who we just removed from this operation? Yes. May I ask why? I pushed the tablet back toward him. Because he's the only one Harlow trusts completely. We need to use that. Silas leaned forward. Eliza, with all due respect, this feels personal. Are you sure you're not just looking for a way to force your father to admit he was wrong about you? The question stung because there was truth in it. Part of me, the wounded daughter part, did want to see my father's face when he learned his star pupil was the very traitor he'd been hunting. Wanted him to recognize that his desk jockey daughter had uncovered what his military instincts had missed. But there was more to it than that. This isn't about vindication, Silas. It's about the most efficient path to neutralizing a threat. My father can get close to Harlow without raising suspicion. None of us can say the same. And if he refuses to help, he won't. I stood up. Not once he sees the evidence. Not once he understands what's at stake. You're betting a lot on a man who's given you very little reason to trust him. I smiled thinly. I'm betting on the soldier, not the father. The soldier will do his duty. And if the father gets in the way, then we'll handle that too. I checked my watch. Set up a secure meeting for 1,400 hours. Just him, you, and me. No recording devices, no observers. Yes, ma'am. Silas hesitated. What about General Baker? He specifically removed your father from this operation. I'll handle Baker. Just get me that meeting. 4 hours later, I sat across from my father in a room so secure that even the president would need special clearance to enter. He looked older than he had at dinner, the lines around his mouth deeper, his eyes shadowed with something that might have been regret. Or maybe just lack of sleep. Thank you for coming, Colonel, I said formally. Not like I had much choice, he replied, eyeing Silas, who stood silently by the door. When the CIA says jump, even retired colonels ask how high. We have a situation that requires your expertise. My father's eyebrows rose. My expertise? I thought I was yesterday's news. Isn't that why I was removed from my own operation? You were removed because you demonstrated a fundamental inability to respect intelligence operations and personnel, I said evenly. That hasn't changed, but circumstances have. I slid the tablet across to him, watching as he scrolled through the surveillance photos. His face remained impressively neutral until he reached the close-up of Major Harlow. Then, just for a moment, something cracked in his expression. Pain, disbelief, betrayal flashing across features trained for decades to reveal nothing. This is doctored, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's not. We have audio confirmation. DNA from a coffee cup he discarded after the meeting. Multiple sightings from different intelligence services. Greg would never. He already has. I cut in. For at least 3 years, according to our assessment. Possibly longer. My father pushed the tablet away as if it were contaminated. Why are you showing me this? Because we need your help to bring him in. A harsh laugh escaped him. My help? You removed me from the operation. Had me escorted from the building by MPs. And now you want my help? Yes. Why? So you can rub my nose in it? Make sure I know that my traitor daughter caught my protege being the real traitor? I leaned forward, keeping my voice level with effort. No, Dad. Because Harlow trusts you. Because he won't see you coming. Because despite everything, you're still the best tactical mind I know, and we need that right now. The compliment seemed to catch him off guard. He studied my face, looking for deception or manipulation, finding only truth. What's the play? He asked finally. We need you to meet with him, act normal. Tell him you're working on your memoirs, and want his input on some of the classified operations you ran together. Get him comfortable, get him talking. We'll handle the rest. You want me to betray his trust. I want you to stop him from betraying his country any further, I corrected, unless that's a problem for you. My father's eyes flashed. Of course it's a problem for me. This kid, this soldier, has been like a son to me. I'm aware. He's eaten at my table, spent holidays with our family. When your brother was deployed, Greg was the one who checked on your mother weekly, while simultaneously selling out everyone at that table to Russian intelligence, I pointed out. Your loyalty is admirable, Dad, but it's misplaced. And if I refuse, then we'll find another way in. It'll be messier, riskier, but we'll do it. And you'll have to live with whatever happens as a result. He was silent for a long moment, his military mind no doubt running through scenarios, calculating risks, weighing options. I'll need 24 hours, he said finally. For what? To process this, to decide if I can do what you're asking. I shook my head. You have 1 hour. Harlow is scheduled to meet his handler again tomorrow. We move before then or we risk losing him. 1 hour to decide if I betray someone I've mentored for a decade? 1 hour to decide if you serve your country or your ego? I countered. Isn't that what you taught us? Duty first. The words hung between us. My father's own military maxim turned back on him like a weapon. I saw something shift in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or at least recognition. 1 hour, he agreed. Then I'll give you my answer. I nodded to Silas, who escorted my father to a secure waiting room. When the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Playing hardball with the man who'd taught me the game was exhausting, even when necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Is he there? Did you show him? Yes, I typed back, giving him an hour to decide. He'll do it, came her immediate reply. He has no choice. Everyone has a choice. I responded, thinking of all the choices that had led us here. My choice to join the CIA instead of the Army. My father's choice to see that as betrayal. Harlow's choice to sell out his country. And now my father's choice whether to help us stop him. Silas returned, his expression troubled. He's asking to make a call. To whom? Your mother. I hesitated. Mom was firmly on my side in this. Had been feeding me information about my father's state of mind, his movements, his conversations with his command. But she was also his wife of 35 years, bound to him by ties I couldn't fully understand. Let him call, I decided. But monitor it. Yes, ma'am. 58 minutes later, my father returned to the conference room. His posture had changed. Squared shoulders and lifted chin, the bearing of a soldier who'd made a difficult decision and would see it through. I'm in, he said without preamble. But I have conditions. Let's hear them. First, I run the operation my way. Your people provide support, but tactical decisions are mine. I started to object, but he held up a hand. This isn't negotiable, Eliza. You want me to use my relationship with Greg to draw him out? Then you have to let me do it in a way that feels natural to him. He knows me too well. He'll spot a script a mile away. I nodded reluctantly. What else? Second, we bring him in alive. No accidents, no convenient heart attacks in custody. He faces trial for what he's done. That was always the plan. And third, he met my eyes squarely. When this is over, you and I sit down and have a real conversation. No ranks, no agencies, No audiences. Just father and daughter. The request surprised me. About what? About everything. About why you really joined the CIA. About why I reacted the way I did. About whether there's anything left of this family worth saving. A lump formed in my throat. Those are acceptable terms. Then we have a deal. He extended his hand and I took it, feeling the calluses of a lifetime of service against my palm. We have a deal, I echoed. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. My father immersed himself in the operational details with the focus of a man half his age, absorbing intelligence briefs, memorizing communication protocols, drilling the extraction team on contingencies. I watched him work, this man I'd spent a decade trying not to become, and saw glimpses of why his soldiers would follow him anywhere. His clarity. His certainty. His absolute commitment once his mind was made up. He's calling, Silas reported as we gathered in the surveillance van 2 blocks from the restaurant where my father was meeting Harlow. I slipped on headphones, my father's voice filling my ears. Thought you might want to grab lunch. I'm reviewing some of our joint operations for my memoirs. Could use your input on Kharkov. Harlow's voice came through clearly, the slight Tennessee drawl that had always made him seem more approachable than his special forces background might suggest. Sure thing, sir. Happy to help. The usual place? Perfect. Noon? I'll be there. The call ended, and I looked at Silas. He's in. Your father is very good at this, he observed. He should be. He's been playing roles his whole life. The words came out more bitterly than I'd intended. Eliza, Silas rarely used my first name in professional settings. Are you sure you're objective enough for this operation? No, I admitted, but I'm the best person for the job anyway. He nodded, accepting the honest answer. At 11:45, my father entered the restaurant, a family-owned Italian place just outside the Beltway that had been a favorite of his command staff for years. Our team had been there since dawn, replacing waitstaff with undercover operatives, installing surveillance equipment, securing escape routes. I watched on the monitors as he was seated at his regular table, ordered his usual scotch, neat, and began reviewing what appeared to be old mission reports, but were actually facial recognition triggers that would allow our AI to track Harlow's micro-expressions during the conversation. At precisely noon, Major Gregory Harlow walked in, 6'2", broad-shouldered, with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being the most capable person in any room. I'd always understood why my father had gravitated toward him. He was everything a military man would want in a protégé. Everything, apparently, except loyal. Colonel? He greeted warmly, clasping my father's hand. Good to see you, sir. Greg, thanks for making time. They ordered, exchanged pleasantries about mutual acquaintances, discussed the latest Pentagon gossip. My father was masterful, giving no hint of the betrayal he discovered or the trap he was setting. So, Harlow said finally, Kharkov, nasty business. One of our finest moments, my father replied. Though the intelligence was problematic. Harlow's expression flickered. How so? Incomplete. Someone held back key elements. I've been reviewing the after-action reports, and some things don't add up. I tensed. This wasn't in the script. My father was improvising, pushing harder than we'd agreed. Sir? Harlow's voice remained steady, but his pulse, visible on our biometric monitors, had accelerated. 3 men died in that operation, Greg. Good men, fathers, husbands. My father leaned forward, and I think someone sold them out. Harlow's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his jacket, where we knew he carried a 9mm Beretta. Take him. I ordered into my comm unit, now. But my father raised his hand slightly, the abort signal we'd established. Sir, Harlow said carefully, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Someone compromised that operation. Someone with access to the tactical plan, the infiltration route, the extraction point. There were dozens of people with that access. Yes, but only one whose financial records show an unexplained wire transfer from a shell company in Cyprus the day after the operation failed. My father's voice was conversational, almost gentle. Only one who made 3 calls to a burner phone purchased by a known GRU operative. Harlow's face drained of color. "Colonel, I think you've been misinformed." "Have I? My daughter seems to think otherwise." I froze. This definitely wasn't in the plan. My father had just revealed his hand, exposed our operation, potentially compromised months of intelligence work. "Your daughter?" Harlow's confusion seemed genuine. "The State Department analyst?" My father smiled thinly. "That's her cover, yes. She's actually CIA, has been for years. Currently heading the task force investigating Russian penetration of military command structures. Your case, specifically." I was halfway out of the surveillance van when Silas grabbed my arm. "Wait," he hissed. "He's doing something." On the monitor, Harlow's expression had shifted from shock to calculation. "Sir, with all due respect, I think you've lost your mind. Your daughter has clearly fed you some conspiracy theory." "Save it, son. We have the evidence, all of it. The meetings, the dead drops, the bank accounts. What I don't have is why. Why did you do it, Greg? Money? Ideology? Blackmail?" Harlow's hand moved again, definitely reaching for his weapon now. "Colonel Reynolds," I said urgently into my father's earpiece. "Abort. He's armed." But my father ignored me, his eyes never leaving Harlow's face. "Stand down, Major. The restaurant is surrounded. There's no way out." "There's always a way out," Harlow replied, and in one fluid motion drew his gun and pressed it against my father's chest, under the table where the other diners couldn't see. "Now we're going to walk out of here together," Harlow continued quietly. "Nice and easy. Or I put a bullet through your heart. Not, if you understand." My father nodded, his expression calm. Too calm. "Dad," I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. "Don't do anything stupid." "All teams move in," I ordered into my calm. "Suspect is armed and has a hostage." But before our teams could reach the door, my father made his move. With speed belying his age, he grabbed Harlow's wrist, twisting it upward, just as the gun discharged into the ceiling. Patrons screamed, diving under tables as my father and Harlow grappled, crashing through a partition into the kitchen. By the time our teams breached the restaurant, it was over. My father stood over an unconscious Harlow, a kitchen knife held casually in one hand. His lip was split, his shirt torn, but he looked more alive than I'd seen him in years. "Took you long enough," he remarked as I rushed in, weapon drawn. "He'll live. Just a little bump on the head." "You were supposed to wait for extraction," I said, holstering my gun. "That was the plan." "Plans change in the field. You should know that, Director." As our team secured Harlow and began clearing the restaurant, my father stepped closer to me. He said something, right before I took him down. Said I should be proud. That he'd done what he did for the same reason I raised all of you to be soldiers. For love of country. "He betrayed his country," I pointed out. "No," my father said quietly. "He betrayed mine. He thought he was serving his. Believed our leadership had become corrupt, compromised. Thought he was the true patriot." I stared at him. "Are you defending him?" "Understanding isn't defending." He winced, touching his split lip. "But it does make me wonder." "About what?" "About how many people I've misjudged. How many patriots I've called traitors." Our eyes met, and for the first time in years, I felt like my father was actually seeing me. Not the disappointment. Not the civilian. Me. "We still need to have that conversation," he said. Yes, I agreed. "We do." 3 weeks after Harlow's arrest, I stood outside a modest brick house in Alexandria, Virginia, clutching a bottle of bourbon and wondering if this was a mistake. The porch light illuminated a row of military service flags, Army, Marines, Air Force, representing the branches my siblings and I were supposed to have joined. All except the CIA, which didn't have a flag you could buy at the base exchange. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. The last time I'd seen my father outside of a secure government facility had been that disastrous dinner where he'd called me a traitor. Since then, we'd worked together to capture a Russian mole, testified before closed Senate committees, and begun the painstaking process of assessing the damage Harlow had done. But we hadn't had that promised conversation, hadn't addressed the wounds that had festered between us for a decade. Before I could decide whether to knock or retreat, the door swung open. My father stood there in jeans and a faded West Point t-shirt, looking oddly vulnerable without his uniform and medals. "Your mother called," he said by way of explanation. "Said you were sitting in your car for 20 minutes working up the courage to come in." I glanced toward the street where my sensible Subaru was indeed parked. Surveillance has never been her strong suit. "She also said you'd deflect with humor when you got nervous." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Come in, Eliza. Please." The house smelled of pot roast and furniture polish, achingly familiar from my childhood. Military housing always had the same sense, no matter the country or continent. I followed my father through the living room, noting the family photos that tracked our growth from gap-toothed kids on various bases to adults in various uniforms. My official State Department photos stood alongside my siblings, military portraits, looking oddly civilian among all that brass and khaki. "Your mother's at her book club," my father said, leading me to the kitchen. "Thought we might talk easier without a referee." I set the bourbon on the counter. "Peace offering." He examined the label. "The good stuff. You must really want this conversation to go well. Or I really think we'll need liquid courage to get through it." He retrieved 2 glasses, poured generous measures, and handed one to me. "To honest conversations," he toasted. "To listening before judging," I countered. We clinked glasses and drank, the amber liquid burning a path down my throat. I welcomed the heat, the momentary distraction from the weight of everything unsaid between us. "Harlow's talking," my father said finally, breaking the silence. "Named 3 more agents in different commands." "I know. I get the daily briefings." I turned my glass in my hands. "That's not why I'm here." "No," he leaned against the counter. "Why are you here, Eliza?" The direct question, so typical of him. No small talk, no easing into difficult topics. It was simultaneously what I'd always respected and resented about him. "You said we needed to talk. About everything. About why I joined the CIA. About why you reacted the way you did. About whether there's anything left of this family worth saving." I did say that. "So here I am." He nodded, took another sip of bourbon. "You know, for years I told myself you joined the State Department to rebel, to hurt me, to reject everything I'd tried to teach you. It wasn't about you. I know that now. But fathers can be stunningly self-centered creatures." He gestured toward the living room. "Shall we sit somewhere more comfortable? This might take a while." We moved to the den, the room where my father had always retreated when the noise of 3 children became too much. His sanctuary, with its leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and the faint smell of pipe tobacco, though he hadn't smoked in years. I chose the chair by the window. He took his usual seat behind the desk, the scene oddly reminiscent of countless childhood reprimands. "When did you actually join the CIA?" he asked. "Was the State Department always a cover?" I was genuinely State Department for the first 2 years. The agency recruited me after I wrote a paper on Russian infiltration tactics that caught someone's attention. "And you never thought to tell me? Your family?" I raised an eyebrow. "Would you have been proud? Or would you have seen it as another betrayal, choosing intelligence over direct military service?" He considered this, swirling his bourbon. "I don't know. Then? Probably the latter. Now? I'd like to think I would have been proud." "That's growth, I suppose." "Hard-earned." He leaned forward. "Eliza, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "Okay. Did you pursue the Harlow investigation to prove something to me? Was any of this personal?" The question pierced deeper than I wanted to admit. Had I subconsciously steered my career toward the intersection of military and intelligence to prove my worth to a father who measured value in stars and stripes? Had I pushed harder on the Harlow case because he was my father's protege? Some of it was personal, I admitted. Not the investigation itself, that was legitimate counterintelligence work, but using you to bring him in? Showing you the evidence myself instead of letting another agent handle it? That was personal. I wanted you to see what I could do. I wanted you to respect it. I do. Respect it, that is. He set his glass down. What you've built, your career, your reputation in the intelligence community, it's remarkable. And I was too blinded by my own expectations to see it. The admission, so long awaited, felt both vindicating and strangely hollow. Why? Why was it so important that I follow your path instead of forging my own? My father was silent for a long moment, his eyes drifting to a photograph on his desk, himself as a young lieutenant standing beside his own father, a World War II veteran. Fear, he said finally. I understood the military, knew its rules, its culture, its dangers, could protect you within that system. But the world you chose, intelligence, covert operations, was a mystery to me. I couldn't protect you there. I never asked for your protection. Number. You asked for my support. And I failed to give it. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Eliza, truly. The apology, unqualified and sincere, caught me off guard. Colonel James Reynolds didn't apologize. He justified, rationalized, explained. But he didn't admit fault. I'm sorry too, I said softly, for shutting you out. For not trying harder to help you understand why I chose the path I did. Why did you choose intelligence over military service? It was the question that had hung between us for a decade, never directly asked until now. I took a deep breath, organizing thoughts I'd rehearsed countless times but never voiced. Because I saw what was coming. The future of conflict isn't tanks and aircraft carriers. It's information, disinformation, cyber warfare. I wanted to be on that front line. I paused. And because I believed I could make a bigger difference there than as one more officer following orders. You never wanted to follow orders, my father said, but there was fondness in his tone now. Even as a child, you had to understand the why before you do anything. Quote, wonder where I got that from. I smiled slightly. Mom says your first word to your drill sergeant was, why? He laughed, a warm sound I'd almost forgotten. Got me 20 push-ups and a nickname that stuck through basic training, Professor, they called me, because I needed to know the reason for everything. Like father, like daughter. Indeed. His expression sobered. Eliza, there's something else we need to discuss. About your operation now. The shift in topic was jarring. What about it? General Baker has asked me to join as a military liaison. Said you requested me specifically. I hadn't, but I could guess who had. Mom? Your mother does have a talent for manipulation that the CIA would envy. He hesitated. I told him I needed to speak with you first. This is your operation, your domain. I won't intrude if you don't want me there. The offer, to step back, to respect my authority, was perhaps the most meaningful gesture he could have made. The old Colonel Reynolds would have assumed his expertise was needed, would have muscled his way in without consideration for how it might undermine me. Actually, I said slowly, we could use someone with your experience, particularly as we expand the investigation to other commands. But there would have to be ground rules. Name them. 1. You recognize that I'm in charge. You advise, you don't command. He nodded. Understood. 2. Our professional relationship stays professional. No pulling rank, no family dynamics in the office. Agreed. And 3. I met his eyes. We continue this. Outside of work, rebuilding what we've broken. Because I'm tired of being estranged from my father, and I think you're tired of being estranged from your daughter. Something softened in his face, a vulnerability I'd rarely seen. I'd like that very much. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of a decade of misunderstanding beginning to lift. There's bourbon left, my father observed. And your mother won't be home for another hour. Want to hear about the time your grandfather caught me trying to go AWOL from basic training? You? The perfect soldier? Tried to go AWOL? I was young and stupid. And there was a girl involved. He refilled our glasses. But that's a story your mother doesn't even know, so it stays between us. Deal. I settled deeper into my chair, prepared to discover a side of my father I'd never known existed. 6 months later, I stood before the Director of National Intelligence, trying not to fidget as she read through the final report on the Harlow network. Sunlight streamed through the window of her office, illuminating the array of intelligence agency flags behind her desk, including, I noted with satisfaction, the CIA's. "Impressive work, Director Reynolds," she said finally, setting down the report. 32 Russian assets identified and neutralized. Classified information recovered. Vulnerabilities patched. The President is very pleased. Thank you, ma'am, it was a team effort. Yes, I see your father's contribution was significant. She studied me. That couldn't have been easy given your history. News traveled fast in the intelligence community, even personal news. It was challenging at first, but ultimately beneficial for the operation. And for us. Good. She stood, extending her hand. The President has asked me to convey his personal thanks. There will be a private ceremony next month. Medals all around, I expect. I shook her hand, already dreading the formality of a White House ceremony. We were just doing our jobs, ma'am. With exceptional skill and courage. She walked me to the door. Oh, and Director Reynolds? Take some time off. You've earned it. Outside, the spring air carried the scent of cherry blossoms and possibility. I checked my phone to find a message from my father. Briefing finished? Meet for lunch? Your mother is making me try that vegan place you like. I smiled, typing back, on my way. Don't let her order the mushroom scallops. They're an abomination. As I walked toward my car, I reflected on how much had changed since that fateful dinner 6 months ago. My father, retired from the Army but now consulting with the CIA on military infiltration prevention. My mother, finally pursuing her long-deferred dream of teaching literature at a community college. My siblings, slowly rebuilding their relationships with me as they saw our father's change of heart. And me? I was still the same dedicated intelligence officer I'd always been. But now I was seen, truly seen, by the man whose approval I'd craved and resented in equal measure for most of my life. My phone rang. Silas, probably with news about the last of Harlow's network being dismantled. Reynolds, I answered. Director. Silas's voice was tight. We have a situation. The safe house in Vienna has been compromised. Our team is under fire. I changed direction, heading back toward headquarters. I'm on my way. Alert the crisis team. And Silas? Call my father. We're going to need his expertise on this one. Already did, ma'am. He's meeting us there. I smiled despite the gravity of the situation. 6 months ago, I would have bristled at Silas taking such initiative, would have seen it as undermining my authority. Now I recognized it for what it was, utilizing every resource to protect American lives and interests. Just as I'd been trained to do, just as my father had taught me, in his way. As I drove toward headquarters, I thought about the lessons of the past year, that sometimes the greatest patriots are the ones questioning the status quo. That loyalty to principles matters more than loyalty to individuals or institutions. That family, like country, is worth fighting for, even when the battles are painful and the victories uncertain. My father would be waiting at headquarters, ready to put his decades of military experience at the service of my operation. Not because he still thought his way was better, but because he'd finally recognized that different approaches could lead to the same goal: protecting what we loved. The traitor's daughter and the soldier father, working side by side after years of estrangement. It wasn't the future either of us had envisioned, but it was the one we'd built from the ashes of misunderstanding and pride. And in that moment, racing toward a new crisis with the knowledge that I wouldn't face it alone, I understood the most important lesson of all: that sometimes being called a traitor is just the first step toward becoming the hero your country and your family truly needs. Never let anyone define your patriotism, my father had said last week as we sat on his porch watching the sunset. Not even me. Especially not me. Words I would carry with me through whatever challenges lay ahead. Words that had transformed a public condemnation into a profound reconciliation. This is the story of how I transformed my father's public condemnation into the most important national security operation of the decade. But more than that, it's the story of how we transformed our relationship, from one of judgment and disappointment to one of respect and understanding. Sometimes the most important intelligence work happens not in secret facilities or foreign capitals, but across kitchen tables and in quiet conversations where truths long hidden finally find their voice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.